Remember to subscribe and like the channel. Be in the moment. Marietta Stories with Rory.
Is that your real thumb? Oh, there it is.
What's up, homies? This is your girl, Rory Zimmerman, coming to you live from the old hometown, Marietta, Georgia. So I am thrilled today to be in the moment with serial entrepreneur and local classmate, Will Adamek. Will, thank you for being in the moment with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I like serial entrepreneur. That's got a good ring to it.
Well, you indeed are. And I heard from Corey Cataldo that you were also an LA fashion model.
Very, very briefly. I was a K-Swiss shoe model for about, I don't know, a month.
Right. So amazing. And I understand that you are a successful restaurateur. You have started several enterprises already, and you are self-taught. It was through your grit and your vision and your persistence and your professionalism that you are where you are today. And not only are you leading Dogwood Catering, but you're also opening a new venture on our beloved Marietta Square, and that is Marietta proper.
Yeah, we're super excited about this one. This is the first project in a long time where I've got new partners, so it's a very different vibe than what I've been doing before. And being on the square is the part that really is the coolest part for me. Just growing up around here, and the square was always like that cool place you'd go to with your parents on Sunday after church, or for the festivals, the fireworks, all the it's just you're there a good bit. The energy that place has always been very cool and very historic at the same time. And honestly, it couldn't be a better location for what we're doing, so I'm very excited about it.
Yes, and what is it that you're doing there with Marietta proper? I understand you have begun the build out of the new site there, which was formerly a jeweler, Hamilton Jewelers.
Yep.
And now you have transformed it, started the transformation process into
Yeah.
being the beautiful high-end bakery tapas wine bar. Is that right?
So we're not going to do a lot of the baking in house. That is something I'm going to outsource to probably Lush, who's also on the square. But it'll be small plates for sure. It'll be mostly focused on being, a high end Gatsby style drinking establishment. Very cozy, very lounge like, but very aesthetically, captivating. It's going to really draw your eye to a lot of different places. There's been a lot of focus on the design elements, both from my partner Casey and my partner Jordan, who are both really good at seeing that kind of stuff. I am not. I don't care. I'm just like I just need to make the salmon. That's all I'm worried about. So it's
That's
it's
the
very
most
cool.
important.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's very cool the different strengths that all the partners have. Casey comes from a commercial real estate background, so navigating the contracts and securing the locations and understanding what rates are fair and dealing with loan processes and things like that. He's very comfortable in that space. Jordan's a longtime chef. I'd say recent sommelier, but it's been a while now since she got certified. But this has been a dream of hers since we were cooking together 15 years ago. She's been talking about wanting to open a wine bar. So come full circle, we all kind of got together and we actually were looking at moving into the Java Cats space where Java Cats used to be. Casey had purchased that building and said, "Hey, I want to do something with this." And we had come up with this concept. And then Hamilton went up for a lease and we were like, "Oh man, this would be so much better over there, especially with the foot traffic." And
Right.
that's how it came to be in that space. That's the whole thing is we all just kind of came together. It was about 2 years of collaborating and talking about it, and then
Hmm.
we tried to poke holes in why it was a bad idea, every day for 6 months, and we couldn't come up with many. It seems like a really good concept, both from a business perspective, but also the location is just fantastic.
Indeed, it is. It is there across from the train tracks and Marietta Pizza, just down the road from Marina.
Yeah.
And it is catty corner there to the Tapas place and the
Yep.
Australian bakery, as well as just down the road from Max. So there already are a lot of restaurants and meeting places and businesses booming there on our dear Marietta Square. So how do you see yourself positioning in this market? Is it as a competitor or is it a win-win-win all the way around the block?
Honestly, I've asked myself that exact same question because it seems as if most everybody that's in business on the square is either intertwined or friendly. There doesn't seem to be a lot of the, this is my square, we're eating here. And most of the concepts are are pretty different in approach. I would say the Tapas place across from us, I went there for my birthday 2 years ago, and it's a very different feel than what we're going for, and a very different aesthetic. And then you got Hamp and Harry's, which has its own thing. But the one thing I've
Mhm.
noticed the commonality between everything on the square, whether forgive me, what's the name of the little Italian joint on the same strip as me? It starts with a P.
Piastra.
Yeah, I
Piastra.
went there the other day. Yeah, and it's good food. But everything's very different. There's not a lot
It
of
is.
similar eateries, and I've noticed that there is no shortage of patronism in any of them. The
Exactly.
only time I've ever seen things not do well on the square is ones that weren't that good. I mean, that's really it.
Mhm.
If you can put together a comfortable space that people want to be in, and you're putting out a reasonably priced product, and it's good, then you don't really have to worry about a lot of the metrics that some standalone restaurants or one-offs, like La Cubana, which is fantastic right down the block from there. you know
Yes.
they're they're not going to get the same kind of foot traffic that we're going to get because they're just on the road. So unless people are going there as their own destination, you know they're they're not going to just get the walk-in crowd, whereas we're going to have 600 to 700 people walking by our front door every day just organically.
True.
And someone might just go, "Hey, I want a breakfast croissant." Cool, we're right there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I
I
think the only competition I see ourselves trying to directly compete for, and it has nothing to do with the food, is the coffee market. I think we are going to try to directly compete with that Starbucks that has the line wrapped around the corner every day, blocking up traffic.
oh,
So
very good.
I think with our high end coffee, on top of being a sommelier, Jordan's also certified in several different coffee certifications, whatever those are.
What is a
And
sommelier? I've not heard of that before.
so a sommelier is basically a wine expert. So it's somebody who
Ooh.
goes through lots of classifications, lots of tasting, training, traveling, going to different parts of the world, learning about the horticulture involved, learning about the everything that's involved in winemaking. They have to reach a certain, it's master chef type thing,
Mhm.
certain levels and certifications. It's hard to get. It's a pretty prestigious thing, and there's levels to it that you can go. I think, and again, I'm not the expert on this, but I know, you can be a level something or other, or a level something or other, and they're all different rankings of it. But basically, if you're a certified sommelier, you are an expert in wine. So you know what tastes good with what region it comes from, how the grapes were done. I mean, everything top to bottom. And she is every bit of that. I mean, she knows wine. She loves wine. She drinks wine. That's her bag. So
Oh.
um
Well,
yeah,
it would
it's
be
it's pretty cool.
lovely to take a class from her, or at least a kind of interactive moment where people
We will
could
be
come
offering,
learn
yeah, we'll be
from her.
offering a lot of that. Exactly. We'll be doing a lot of that. Classes, bring in groups, do tastings,
Yes.
talk through
Oh,
the subtleties of different wines and things like that. Plus, the beauty of our menu is going to be a rotating seasonal menu. So, along with the new printout of the menu, we will have the wines that were featured at the time paired with each of the things. So, if you want to get the risotto, you know that it goes with this Riesling, whatever it may be. And it's watch, I bet you that's way wrong. She's gonna see this and say you would never pair risotto with a Riesling, but
right, but you
we'll
illustrated the
see.
point on
Yeah.
cue, right?
So
So that's on
I, I
target.
think that's cool. Another cool feature we're gonna have that I don't think a lot of people are used to are what's called enomatic machines. And basically, what they are is if you're a member or you come in and get a card, think Dave and Buster's Chuck E. Cheese, where you preload a card.
Ah,
It's a machine where you can do self serve across a number of bottles, and you can determine the amount that you want to spend. So let's say we have a $1,500 bottle of wine. Well, you would never uncork that for yourself because that's an exuberant price point. But man, I'd love to know what it tastes like. Well, you can get a 1 ounce pour for $10 and just try it. You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of those machines is it allows people one to be self-serve. So let's say you're at 4th of July fireworks and you don't want to wait in line, you don't want to talk to a bartender, you don't want to deal with all that. If you've been vetted and we can flash an ID because we have somebody that stands near the machines just to check ID. But other than that, you walk up, you tap your card, you take your glass, you get your wine, you go back outside. And it's very,
beautiful.
yeah, it's very
That's
individualized.
genius. And now we are
And
an open container scene there in the Marietta
boy,
Square.
are we. And that's going to be a very unique feature of our space as well is we're one of the first people on the square to be doing new construction post that the passing of that law. So we get to have the foresight of like, well, how can we use that to our advantage? And one of the things that we are doing both for the AM breakfast, grab and go, and coffee service, as well as the high end foot traffic on festival days and things like that, is we will have a fully functional beverage service window. You can walk up, get a beer, and walk. You don't even have to come in. So I think that's going to set us apart a little bit. I've noticed most all of the restaurants on the square when they do have festivals they have to go set up tables, buy drink
Exactly.
dispensers, you know what I mean. This
Mhm.
will be a window that's in service daily. So man, I don't want to go wait in line at that Starbucks. Cool, just pull up on our window, we'll hand you a macchiato and a muffin and you're out the door. It's fast,
Wow.
it's quick. And we're working on an app too where people can just pre-order breakfast too. So all the lawyers, all the judges, all the people that have to be in the door by 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., they pull up, they go behind our back alley. We have somebody walk out their order to them and they're on their way. And
Mhm.
I think it'll be an answer people are looking for to that Starbucks traffic.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. And even though it is lighting a fire there on the square, that's a good thing
Yeah,
because when other businesses are triggered or, let's say, inspired by you, it makes everything better.
I agree. I agree. And on top of that, everybody running those businesses there can now get their coffee faster when they're going in the morning. So it's even better.
Exactly. That's so true. There's a lot of that traffic from the locals to other restaurants in the
Big
area.
time.
So
I mean,
that
I've
is
eaten,
super
I've eaten at all of them. So.
Yes. Right.
In
And
fact,
then
I
what about the tapas? So what are tapas and how are your establishment's tapas, Marietta proper, going to have their own brand or style to them?
So my culinary roots obviously have been pretty cemented in Georgia, local cuisine. I grew up, eating the pork, the grits, the more southern fried version of foods.
Hmm.
But recently, working across different platforms, and I think what a lot of chefs in the South have figured out, that there's really something beautiful about something so country and so rudimentary as like a biscuits and gravy, but done elevated, or a fried green tomato done with higher end ingredients, or, insert thing here. But it's, if you can cross the line between technically well prepared, cool ingredients, and then combine that with simplicity of Southern cooking, there's something kind of magical about the way that that goes. Now, because my partner is also a trained chef, and she is thinking about the wine part of it, there's going to be some influence from kind of all over the place. I mean, we're going to have little olive dishes with peppers, and little things that are Spanish and influence, French influenced, Italian influence a lot, because those are your big wine countries. You know what I mean? So we're obviously going to have a lot of things, but if I can add my little, for lack of a better word, country fried touch to it,
Hmm.
one of the big dishes that she and I are both looking forward to pushing is fried chicken skins and caviar that gets paired with champagne. And she's like, "This is the best pairing ever." And I'm like, "You had me at fried chicken skin. I'm in." So it's
Right,
gonna be
exactly.
cool. I think it's very cool to have another partner who has such a culinary background on the team as well,
Hmm.
because what I've noticed working in this industry, between catering or working in the film productions, or even the fraternity houses we service across the country, is, chefs can do a variety of different things, but it's still their food. You see what I'm saying? So eventually that becomes kind of one note. So I think that's where restaurants, they change executive chefs a lot. They change sous chefs a lot, because it's not so much that anything goes bad. It's just the influence and the creativity becomes a little stagnant, because cool, you came up with a new thing, but it still has Will all over it. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
it's different if you're like, "Oh, there's Will with a little Jordan, and Mike threw this in, and now we've got this really cool collaborative thing that I could have never conceptualized, they could have never conceptualized, but collectively." And I think that's going to be the really fun part of this for me. Is this is the first time that I haven't really been handcuffed or constrained. I can do anything. The whole world is my oyster at this point as far as this menu goes, and I'm
Wow.
pretty jazzed about that, because my most recent few years have just been me basically on the admin and sales side of things. I've been, behind the
Really?
desk a lot more. Yeah, like
I'd love
if
to hear
I'm,
your whole story too, Will. How did you get into the whole industry?
oh God, by default, and being a delinquent. um, as you know, I left high school pretty early. I think I was out of there like maybe quarter of the way through sophomore year. When
Wow.
I
Wow.
left, and then I got my
And
GED when I was, God, I was either 15 or 16 when I got my GED.
good for you.
Um, and then I started at Georgia Perimeter College when I was either right when I turned 17 or just before I turned 17. So I was like,
Hmm.
cool, I'm going to get this whole head start in the college thing, and I'm going to be done before everybody. And then fast forward, I'm like 27 and still taking classes. But um, really, I started washing dishes. You remember a place on Johnson Ferry in what used to be the Kmart shopping center called Antoinetta's? It's where
No,
Capozzi's is now.
I
Okay,
remember Capozzi's.
so it's what preceded Capozzi's. Was probably my first actual restaurant job. Like, I had done Dairy Queen and a couple other places. Actually, no, Antoinetta's might have been my first job. I think I was 13.
Oh,
I
and
think I
they
was
made
13.
calzones?
Yeah, they made it was basically the same kind of setup as Capozzi's is, just different name.
Right.
Um,
Okay, great. So you were washing dishes.
Washing dishes at
Essential.
13, 14, and 15, and kind of between the ages of 13 to God, the rest of my life, I've probably had 56 different kitchen jobs throughout the years, or restaurant hospitality oriented jobs. Um, so and a lot of it was just, like I said, by default. I didn't know how to do anything else. I had been doing it since I was 13. I never took any specific studies in college that would lead me to a different career path. So while I was taking my psychology classes, which I never had any intention on being a psychologist, so I don't know why
It
I was
was
taking
just
psychology.
interesting.
So I just kept doing it. And then
Yeah.
I had some cool opportunities along the way, but I think the real turning point that led me to being in business and really starting my own thing was, one, I had worked in corporate restaurant long enough to know that the only way to make any money over 50 grand a year was by being a manager or general manager. And I looked at all of those people and they all absolutely hate their lives. Like, it is being a corporate restaurant manager. I can't think of, I honestly, incarceration might be a better option than having to do that. It is awful. Like, I just remember thinking back on every one of those people I've ever had. I was like, man, not one of them was happy in their life. Not one of them had good work-life balance. Not one of them enjoyed their job on a daily basis. Every one of them had to take shit from some corporate higher up. Like, it was just not, it just looked awful. And it wasn't a lot of money. It was just benefits and like 50K. It was just middle management and an environment with just the worst kind of employees for the most part, because they're transient or they don't, it's always a lot of turnover. And then just a bunch of higher ups that have no real concept of what is actually going on in your individual restaurant, telling you what you should be doing to fix your problems that they don't know anything about. And it just seemed awful. So I actually got out of it in 2007. I was like, I'm done. I was working at La Madeleine at the time as a corporate trainer for them.
I love La Madeleine. That was
yeah,
great.
my sister. I had a bit of nepotism that got me into La Madeleine. My sister was the GM there, and had gotten me put on. And then it was I was a terrible employee. Let's just put it that way. I've always been a terrible employee. So I ended up leaving that, and right around the time, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but poker became a really big thing for a while there in 2006, 2007, all the way up to the 2010s, 2020s. So online was big, but then they canceled the online, and the federal kind of got it, called it gambling. So they shut it all down. So what stemmed from that was a lot of home games and pop-ups and people having basically illegal card games in their house, but it's just guys getting together, gambling on their own. So I had a partner of mine, he and I had decided we were going to venture into that space. So we went out and rented a high-rise apartment building in the city. We ended up getting these $5,000 custom tables and chips, and we basically opened up a poker room in the city, kind of like an underground scene. And how that all plays into this was I used to cater my own games, because why have the extra overhead and expense if I can just make the stuff myself, and the stuff I'm going to make is better than what we would buy from, Chick-fil-A platters and stuff like that. So one of the guys that was playing in my game, and I mean, I was making like $2,000 a week just watching people play poker. That's all I did. I just watched people play poker and make sure that we fed them. I mean, that was the whole name of the game. It was really, really easy. But one of the kids that was in my game was this gentleman named Daniel Wyman, and I'm getting notifications like every 8 seconds. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
This gentleman named Daniel Wyman, who has now gone on to become actually quite a famous poker player. He's won several WSOP events, but the kid came up to me at the end. He's like, "Hey man, I really dig the food at your game." He's like, "I play in games all over the city, but the food here is the best, and you guys are one of the lower stakes games, and I go to these high stakes games and the food's not as good. Like, where does it come from?" And I'm like, "Oh, I make it all." And he's like, "You make this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You cook?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, my fraternity at Georgia Tech is looking for a new chef. Would you have any interest in this?" And I was like, this was right around the time where a lot of the games were getting robbed. A lot of the games were getting raided by the police and stuff like that. And a lot more people were starting to owe us money. So I was kind of having to be that guy, like, "Where's my money? Where's my money?" You know what I mean? And I was like, I don't want to be this guy. This life isn't really sustainable. It's only a matter of time. So I was like, "Yeah, I'm interested. What do you got? Talk to me about it." And it turned out to be a really cool gig. It was like $1,600 every 2 weeks, which was great money for cooking. And it was Monday through Friday. I'm off on the weekends. I'm off on all holidays, and I'm off in the summers. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that for sure. So I think like back then, like I said, I had worked for about 1 million restaurants, but I didn't know how to cook. I knew how to cook their stuff, follow this recipe guide. You put this in the basket for 4 minutes, you pick it up. But that didn't tell me like how cod cooks or why I've got to rest a steak or all of the technicalities and things you would learn in culinary school or, working for a real company, not corporate bullshit. So, why we don't microwave food, things like that. And so I learned how to cook in this frat job where I was feeding about 50 kids twice a day, lunch and dinner. And I did that from 2008 to 2012. And in that 4-year time span, I had also started doing people's like my friend's bar mitzvahs or my friend's mom's birthday or little weddings here and there because I was working on the weekends for a catering company called Bold American Catering, which is actually probably one of the biggest catering outfits, maybe in the Southeast. They're really big. They're the ones that do stuff for the Falcons and, like high-end Mercedes and all the corporate clients in Atlanta that are doing big $300,000-$400,000 parties. It's probably going through Bold. And they're part of the fifth group, restaurant group, which owns like La Tavla and Echo and El Taco and all of those places. And in that catering outfit, I realized like, man, it's really interesting work. I really like doing this. You go to a different location, you go with like this little like rat pack pirate ship of people that you barely know, but you're all working toward the same thing. But everybody's kind of like their own, like it was cool. It kind of reminded me of being on like the X-Men or something. Like everybody had their own little superpower. Like I know how to make pancakes better than anyone in the world. You're like weird, but okay. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And so it was really cool to see like somebody take a group of ragtag people that don't know the menu, didn't prepare the products, didn't ever go to this place before, hadn't seen half the equipment, and put together this mega functional event relatively seamlessly. I mean, there's always a lot of hiccup to it, but it was like at the end of the day, it got done. And I was like, wow, that's cool. Like, what a cool thing to do. And that guy, I kind of just started really paying a lot of attention to. And he ended up marrying my sister. So he's now my brother-in-law. Beautiful. And I was able to really lean on him a lot as a mentor early on in my catering stuff. Like, chef, I've got to hold fish for like 170 people hot for 4 hours. Like, what's the best way to do this? Or like, what kind of equipment do I need to do? And so I started doing more and more adventurous catering, things outside of like the foil pans and the chafing dishes. I'd start doing more presentation, more stations and things like that. And then in 2012, the fraternity that had me had these guys, my competitors, because I started my own business doing this. But back then they were just a big group that came out and they outbid me. They were like, hey, you guys aren't happy with what you're getting. And to be fair, they shouldn't have been. I was doing a lot of catering and I think my attention was kind of divided. Mm-hmm. So I think they were getting a lesser product and I don't blame them at all for making the switch. But basically, this company came in and promised them the world at a cheaper price point than what they were paying me. And they were like, hey, chef, you got to go. And so I was doing all of my catering out of that kitchen. So now I've lost my job and my kitchen.
Right.
And I've got events booked out for probably 6 months, people that have been asking me to do stuff. So I'm like, shit, what do I do? So there's a bar in East Cobb called Bradley's Bar and Grill. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I've been to Bradley's once or twice.
Yeah. So Bradley's is owned by a gentleman named John Capone. And John Capone and I had always been friendly because I'd talked to him when I was in there. And, he and I were always on good terms. And I knew that kitchen didn't do a ton of food volume. It was mostly a bar atmosphere. So I said, hey, man, I've got these events that I have to do mostly on Saturdays. Can I rent out your kitchen from you on a per use basis? And he was like, sure, just throw me like $100. And I was like, okay. That was an easy yes. And then that went on for probably the better part of a year, maybe a year and a half, until where we just got so big that none of it made sense. And he was like, hey, man, like, you're in here 5 days a week now. You're taking up all my cooler space and I'm getting $400. Like, it's not worth it. And so he had the foresight to talk to me about partnership and how we could kind of come together on it. And from that partnership, we eventually built out the space down below that he found out about through his relationship with the landlord of that shopping center. It used to be a bakery that did all of the cakes for Intermezzo, and God, there was somebody else. They did a high volume bakery that had just gone out of business. Yeah,
Oh,
so they were gone, but the space was already outfitted with walk-in coolers. It already had a mixer in it. It already had ovens in it. And we were able to negotiate a fantastic lease on that space. And that's where the Dogwood Catering Kitchen came to be. And we've been there since 2018, I want to say. We've been in there. So almost 5 years now.
mm-hmm.
And it's great. It's on the back end of a shopping center. Nobody can even see us from the road. We can park our food trucks back there, our trailers back there. We've got, 15 or 20 employee cars that are back there at all times. Nobody cares. Like it's our own little private island, and it's freaking great. So,
Wow.
yeah, that's how the catering company came to be. And then that company, that fraternity that fired me,
Mm-hmm.
called me back 1 year later, right as their contract was expiring, and said, "Hey, we've made a terrible mistake. These guys suck. We really want you back." And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm doing like, $30,000 a month in catering sales right now," which at the time I thought was big shit. And it was, because I was the only employee. So it was, it was much bigger, probably more profitable back then, to say the least. But I said, I can't do it. But I had this like moment of clarity where I was like, hey, I bet I could get one of my chef friends a very cool job, like cush job, and I can just have them pay me $100 a month, like kind of like a headhunting type thing. Like,
Yes.
hey, you're gonna make $3,500 a month for a very cush job. Throw me 100. And that was kind of where my rationale was. So I called my buddy that I had worked with at La Madeleine. I said, hey, man, here's this job. It's freaking cush. It's very easy. Would you like to? He was like, yeah, let's do it. So he took the job. Within 2 weeks, I got a call from a fraternity down the street. And they said, hey, we hired our chef out from under the company he was working for. The semester's already started. They're 2 weeks into their meal plan at this point.
Mm-hmm.
They said, we tried to hire this guy, but he had signed a no compete. So the original company came in and tried to serve us papers saying, hey, if you keep this guy, we're going to sue you. So they had to let the chef go. So now they've got a meal plan with people who've already paid $70,000 for it for the semester. They have no chef. And they're like, we heard you just started up the street. Can you help us out? And I was like, yeah, I can staff and manage it for you. And then literally from those two accounts, we now do 46 different accounts across the country. And we're looking to do probably add on another 5 or 6 over the summer. It's become a huge business, a big part of our business. And it's really cool. I think the Greek life side of things is super fun. It's very fascinating to me. And the growth potential in that is unlimited because it is not a saturated market at all. There's about 6 big players in the entire country and then a lot of smaller operations. And that's it. So it's wide open. And honestly, you can't keep these people happy all the time. So they're always rotating and there's a lot of turnover. So it's just a matter of time before you end up in certain markets. And it's really fun. Plus it lets me travel a little bit. So, sometimes it's cool. Sometimes it's like the middle of Indiana, but
Still, there's culture everywhere. No matter where you go, you can learn something.
And a ton of perspective for sure. Like you can learn a lot. Like I think Grand Forks, North Dakota is probably one of my least favorite places to travel to, but I do come away with certain appreciations for things I have at home. And then maybe certain understandings on how people could end up in places that are less than desirable in my mind, So it's interesting.
Have you been there recently?
I have started delegating that trip to other people, but they have also told me they're never going back. So our most recent, so we have 5 contracts up there, and I don't know if you're familiar with the area, but it's basically right on the Canadian border. It's about 40 miles south of the border.
Yeah,
and
I know the bison.
Yeah, so it's an hour north of Fargo.
Okay.
And the talent level up there for culinary people there's nothing. I mean, there's nobody. Every restaurant up there is hiring. Every restaurant up there is pretty bad. There is not a lot of like anything you would consider foodie food. It's like Texas Roadhouse is probably like top of the line in that area. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
So it's a very rough landscape to hire talent. So currently I've had to purchase an apartment up there, and I have to import people from other parts of the country to have them work that operation. And so I'm basically running an oil rig. It feels like, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you guys got
Right.
to go out for 6 months, but it's like, it's a world that I never could have seen myself like entering into just from like thinking back at making quiches at La Madeleine to this.
Hmm.
It's been very quick in my brain. It's been a whirlwind.
Yes. So it is something that has happened intuitively and by seizing the moment and personal relationships and making the most of things, right? And problem solving. It's so exciting, Will. I mean, you've built this whole enterprise and it continues to expand into new markets. So I see you have this recruiting and uh, talent placing service. And yet also you've gone into the movie business, catering for the film sets that are here in Atlanta and all across the state of Georgia.
That's a wild scene. that is an animal. It was like discovering a new species for me when we've started doing this. So we we're now in partnership with a company called Atlanta Craft Services. And my partner in that venture, a gentleman named Zach, he and his partner started this company where they were doing, if you're familiar with the concept of craft services, it's basically the kind of stuff they set up in green rooms, snacks, coffees, drinks, grab and goes. But for feature films, they're a little bit more in depth. They'll have, they got to have all the gluten free. They got to have all the different types of snacks. So it's basically setting up a 7-Eleven underneath a tent in a weird location every day is really what it is. I mean, and then they got to come up with a couple snacks a day, and there's a lot of union guidelines that you have to deal with, which, being a Georgian, and
Mhm.
working in this environment my whole life, we never dealt much with unions. We never dealt much with Teamsters. I think the first time I
Mhm.
ever even heard about unions was when I was an overnight stocker for Kroger, and they had a union for that. And
Mm.
I don't think I subscribed to it because they were like, you got to pay dues, and I'm like, I'm not doing that shit. So but having guidelines where it's like, yo, if the food's not out by within 15 minutes of this call time, the production has to pay a meal penalty to every employee, which they in turn just hand straight to us and say, hey, that cost us 30 grand. Here you go. And you're like, whoa. So there's a lot of new rules. The logistical challenges of hey, today we're at a boxing gym in Decatur. Tomorrow we're at an abandoned church in Lawrenceville. And you don't get the call times. Like, let's say we're supposed to have breakfast ready at 7:30 a.m. We won't find out about where they're going to be sometimes or when they want breakfast until 10 o'clock at night when they wrap shooting. So anybody that's supposed to be in at 4 a.m. from my team is asleep. So I don't
Mhm.
know what time to tell the people that are supposed to be in early where they're going to be or what time they're supposed to be in by the time they're going to bed.
Mhm.
It is, it's wild. Like it is a set of challenges unlike I've never seen, but I'll say we're getting much better at it, but I don't think it's the kind of thing that you can ever master. There's people that are probably pretty good at this, but it is such a state of flux and chaos at all times. And there's just too many variables to say, yeah, like I've got this. Like, no, you don't. You think you do, and then you won't. You know what I mean? There's
Right.
not a lot of controls
Continuously
there.
improving.
Yeah.
Very good.
So
And it,
you get better at adapting. That's what it is. You get better at learning how to be adaptive.
yes, and that is so important. That is one of the crucial skills of humanity is that we're adaptable and that we
Absolutely.
can continuously learn and adapt and thrive in new environments. And I've listened to some stoicism from time to time, and they do say that the concept of the diamond, within the earth is, created through great pressure.
Yeah.
So it seems like that is the case for you. You have that attitude where you are ever emerging as a diamond, in these challenging environments and new markets. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
so
think I love it.
proud of
I
you.
really do. I think I love it. I think that is my comfortable place is just like constant frantic energy around me at all times. And I think a lot of that came from working in restaurants my whole life. Like
Yeah.
that is the environment. If you've ever worked a Mother's Day brunch, like you know that feeling, it's just a madhouse, and you've got to be comfortable in it, or else it'll eat you up
That's so
completely.
true.
So
So true. And how do you manage work-life balance then, or sense of uh, peace within your heart when you have all of these various responsibilities and challenges on a daily basis in this line of work as a serial entrepreneur in these amazing places around the country?
I think the most important part of it, and honestly, that's probably the area that's been the last to develop with me. I was married once before my current wife, and I think a lot of that relationship took on the brunt of the growing pains of learning how to take on a lot of things along those ways. Plus, in that same time frame, I had a child, so I have a newborn, and all of it at that time. I think the balance was not great. Especially the me time, or the self reflection, or the quiet time, to
Mhm.
where I could kind of wrap my head around concepts. There wasn't that. It was, I have to be doing this task at all times. And
Mhm.
I think what I've been able to do um, in recent years, obviously the child's older, so the demands are different now. They're not as immediate, but they're still there, but they're not like, hey, the kid's crying, you have to stop everything you're doing and go do that. So there's that. My new wife works in the industry, has worked in the industry, so she's very understanding of what it is that we do, and the whys. So it's a little less pressure from that end, to where it's like, where are you? Why aren't you home? She's like, oh, you got to go do that. Sucks, but it is what it is. And it's,
Mhm.
so there's a little bit of that, but it's also being able to give myself boundaries. I don't think I ever had boundaries before. I
Yes.
think it was, if the phone rings, I answer it no matter what. Like, if it
Mhm.
rings, I answer it no matter what. And now it's like, no, I'm at my daughter's play at school. I'm not going to answer my phone right now. And realizing, it took me doing that several times to realize that the world wasn't going to end if I didn't do that.
Mhm.
Because in my mind, I'm like, this is so urgent. This has to happen. And then by ignoring a few of them, and then a few more, and then a few more, I realized, like, oh, no, it won't. Like, nothing's going to die. I mean, there are those calls you have to get, but it's not every call. So
Yes.
it took me kind of having to deactivate my brain a little bit in that scape to realize that. So that's helped with the balance a lot. Is I can be in the moment a
Yeah.
little bit better now, but it took understanding of the importance of being in the moment as well. Like, I've had a lot of people over the past 5-10 years of my life be like, yeah, you're here, but you're not here. You're on your phone. You got to step out for a call every 8 minutes, this and that. Like, even this moment right here where we've been on, I've had 16 text messages and 32 Slack notifications.
Oh no. Do
It's
you Slack?
constant.
Do you
Yeah,
like
Slack's
Slack?
great. Love it.
Do you?
Love it. I
Yeah.
mean, for yeah, it's incredible. Especially for the Greek life side of things, where I've got people I'm trying to manage across state lines, and I've
Mhm.
got hey, chefs, every single meal you have, I want a picture of it. That way, if the client comes to me and says, hey, we didn't get enough, or I tell you to make butter chicken, the Indian butter chicken, but you basically grilled chicken and put butter on it because you didn't understand the assignment, I can visually see what you're doing, correct mistakes, give kudos where kudos are due. Plus, we get the added bonus of having a lot of content for social media. We got all these beautiful pictures of food, which we use to fuel our Greek life Instagram page and other stuff, and show prospective clients, like, hey, this is the kind of food we do. And I can go right to my Slack channel and open that up. I just did that when I was at Purdue 2 weekends ago. I'm like, hey, just so you guys know, like, this is real time. These guys just sent me this. This is the food we do. This is us. And I think that adds a lot of validity to a company, because really the only other thing they have to go on is my word, and then a meal that I cooked for them, knowing all the variables ahead of time. So it's like, of course that meal is going to be good. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? That's like me coming in and catering a private dinner for anybody. If I've got all the time to prep it and I have the understanding, but how do you do it consistently? You can make me a great steak, but can your chef make food for 70 people, twice a day for an entire semester? And it's like, well, all of these chefs do it. Look, here, all of them. Here's everything. So it helps a lot with validity in that way too. So yes, I love Slack. My problem with Slack is that if you understand Slack, there's channels.
Right.
So, accounting and this production and this return, I'm on every single channel. So when I open my Slack, it has a little red dot next to each channel that tells you where you've missed notifications. Mine has chicken pox. There's 100 messages on there. And so I'm constantly having to either go back up 48 messages and read them all down, or I just wait for somebody to call me and ask me what they were putting in Slack. It's gotten kind of redundant for me, but my team uses it a lot to function, which is great.
Right. So that's a great example of the balance and boundaries too, is that we have technology to assist us and be an asset to us in many ways. And yet also we have to remember to be in the moment, as you say, and to say, you know what? I'm looking at this beautiful tree here on the campus of Purdue and appreciating this moment. And wow, breathe in the fresh air. And that is just as important as anything else, any other task.
I probably still don't do that enough. And I do admit that, like, even though I'm not actively doing the tasks that I'm avoiding to be in the moment, I do catch myself thinking about a lot of it a lot. And I don't know if there's any avoidance from that just because of the way that my brain's wired.
Yeah.
I bounce a lot. I mean, you knew me as a child. I was very spastic, very hyperactive, couldn't stop talking in class. So all of the things that I used to get, chastised for in a scholastic setting, I've had to kind of remanufacture into something that can be beneficial for me in a professional setting. But it does still have its, its drawbacks and its limitations, where it's like you can't stop the ping pong, as I like to call it. It just
Very good. And it could be also a manly trait, right? As you're a man, you're problem solving too. So
yeah,
I think
for sure.
it could be something about alpha. Maybe you're out there thinking a lot, planning a lot, doing a lot. So that's why it's also good, for friends or family to say, hey, look at this beautiful moment and
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah, my wife
Touch.
is a fantastic barometer for those things, for sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's great. And then that's the balance. I mean, honestly, the time with my daughter, the time with my wife, the time with the family, even just doing like it's weird, tasks that I would dread doing before, like yard work or home improvement projects. I relish them now because I'm like, oh, I can take a break and go do work. You know what I mean? But it's a different
Right.
work entirely, and it's so, like, minus the poison ivy I got last weekend from clearing out ivy.
Mhm.
It's very relaxing. So I've been able to turn tasks that I would normally not want to do into kind of almost like a vacation type headspace from my thoughts and the work side of things. So it's cool. I mean, it still carries the moniker of, like, it's something I have to do because it is stuff that I have to do, but it's
Right.
not a pressure
Reinforce.
situation. Yeah,
Yes.
and
My
there's no
mom,
failure at it. Like, I can't fail at cutting the ivy.
right. You just do it. It's like
Just
cleaning a
do it
restaurant. All you have to do is keep cleaning it. And
forever.
then you learn this works in everything. Just keep going, keep cleaning.
Yep.
So my mom would often say simplicity, order, beauty, joy. So it's that when you do those tasks, you have that simplicity. You've cleaned the yard, you've cleaned the space, and it's in order. And you say, this looks beautiful. And then you have that sense of joy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like
That's
that.
that's it. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. That's a wise one.
Yes. So shout out to moms here, there, and
Good job,
everywhere.
Mom.
And what would you say? So I was looking at our old yearbook this morning.
Oh God.
And I saw you wearing the Metallica t-shirt on picture day. So what would you say? Were you a punk or were you a rocker? What would you call your style for Dodge Middle School?
Dodging middle school was the beginning of the punk rock phase for me, for sure.
Hmm.
Do you remember Brian Cove?
Of course.
Yeah, so Brian and we grew up together in Bishop's Green, so he and I were very close, and I attribute him to putting me on to a lot of my musical stylings as a youth, because I thought he was like the coolest dude, and he always had this like real smooth, kind of suave, like surfer cool guy thing about him. So I tried to emulate a lot of what he did most of the time, because and we were good friends too. So when he started listening to, he got real into guitar, started listening to a lot of Metallica. So I started listening to Metallica, and then that kind of transferred to like the Misfits and NoFX and the punk rock side of things. So it was mostly punk rock until probably sophomore year of high school, when everything just went gangster rap. We just couldn't help it.
Right. And did you get
Yeah.
into Tupac?
No, but Biggie. I was a Biggie guy.
Biggie.
I was a Biggie guy. But yeah,
Right.
I blame Mike DeMita for a lot of that. He made me like way too into hip hop.
Mike DeMita. Shout out.
Yeah, shout out Mike DeMita, whoever that guy is now.
Seriously. Well, I know that, yeah, it seemed like you were a punk rocker, and like you say, this spastic energy. A lot of that, those are early signs of success and aptitude that maybe in the factory-like setting of a public school, it could get squashed, but you never let it squash you. You just took it and ran with it and thrive and thrive and thrive. And I love it. I think it would be great if you wrote a book, Will.
Golly, yeah, that would be quite the tale.
Yes.
I don't know how much of it I would have to self-edit out of there. Like, oh, I don't want to tell people about that shit,
Right. Well, at least start writing today, and you can always edit it later. Just don't edit as you write, write freely,
yeah.
Write freely. And then on a completely different time, then edit. Because
that makes sense.
Go with the flow. Yes.
For sure.
But you have great stories to share, and you're a great, example of leadership in our hometown and in our community. So I'm thrilled for you to be in the moment with me today and to learn from you. And then also, we have this common memory of a play that you produced back in the 8th grade, Mrs. Horton's
That would never fly today.
And Mrs. Horton was a visionary lady. I remember her telling us, she said, in the future, you will watch people on TV, regular people. And I said, why would we do that? And she said, because it will be interesting. And then all these years later, we've had all this reality TV, the podcast era.
That lady was so cool in retrospect. Like at the time, I didn't think it, but man, and thinking back on the fact that she even let us write and do the O.J. Simpson play in the middle of the O.J. Simpson trial, like, wow. It was definitely something. It was definitely something. And not only that, but we put musical scores to it. We had 3 acts. And then on top of that, she liked it so much that she ended up getting the 6th grade class to come see it, the 7th grade, and the 8th grade class to come see it. So we had 3 performances of this play that never should have been allowed to be happening to begin with. Like, that was incredible.
Yes,
that was incredible.
I remember your song, "The Juice is Loose."
Oh my gosh.
Meanwhile, the girls part of the class, we did a very serious play, and we talked about important issues, and it was very dramatic. It was like a tragic drama, and we were all talking about these important social issues. And then you all, after you did "The Juice is Loose," just sat there and shot spitballs at all of us.
Sounds about right.
Yes, and I think
sounds about right.
Funny, really. Even then,
I remember
together great productions.
You gotta send me some pictures out of that yearbook, because I'm thinking about that play, and I'm thinking about Jeff Ford and Corey Cataldo and Kevin Toland and all those John Dalton.
I'll superimpose the picture onto the video.
But I am imagining a terrible redheaded bowl cut. A shirt with some sort of skulls and blood on it. 96. And probably, oh God, 96. I was so not cool.
You were too.
I thought I was, but I was not.
Here it is.
Oh my God, I can't wait to see this. Oh Jesus. We,
You got the
well,
hint
it's
and
awesome.
everything.
Oh my God. You got to send me a screenshot of that when we get off of here.
I
Is that,
will. Look at that. We
is
got
that
Adam
from, is
Cooper,
Adam Cooper?
Bradley.
I ran into him not too long ago.
Who?
Adam Cooper.
Yes, yeah, he's close by too.
Yeah, he's doing well. I always really liked that guy.
Yeah, me too. There were so many great people from Dodgen,
For
and then
sure.
later Pope and Walton too. It was
Yeah,
a great community.
a lot of people don't understand that when they were like, what was like the best year of your life? And I'm like, eighth grade.
I
Eighth grade
know.
was so much fun. We had so much fun. And then the bitch
We
about
really did.
Dodgen is that like everybody splits, you know what I mean, between Walton and Pope.
Exactly.
So it's like, I think that
It
was a
was a
real
moment
reason
in
why.
time.
Yeah, I think it's a real reason why I didn't make it very long in high school either, was because like the majority of my friend group all went to Walton.
Right.
And like a very small section of my friend group ended up going to Pope. So it was like, and then my best friend Brian had gotten held back in like I think sixth or seventh grade. So now we were a year apart. So
Ah, right. And
yeah,
he went to Walton, I think, didn't he? Or
no,
no,
he
he went
ended
to Pope.
he went to Pope. He went to Pope. He was a year behind us. But yeah,
Seriously, that was the best group. That
so much
our
fun.
eighth grade class, the whole time we were there. It was a great bunch of people. But I do think it made us stronger because we were split in half. And
Yeah,
then the big schools we went into, they weren't split. So I think that was good for us in the long run because it made us a little bit more adaptable.
yeah. Those of you
They
that
came
made it,
in with their
I
cliques
ran.
intact. Huh?
Yeah, I said those of you that made it, I ran away. I didn't want
Well,
to
you
do it.
made it too. You got your GED. I mean, that's
I
quite
don't think that.
a
I
mature
don't
thing
think
to
that's
do.
making it. I
Right.
think.
You checked it
I
and
think
moved on.
yeah.
We're
I don't know.
free. Everybody can have their own path.
Yeah,
So,
I don't think I would have done it differently. That regimen was not for me. I don't think here's the thing. I probably could have finished it. I don't think I would have had much success from it. And I don't think my GPA or SAT scores or anything at the time would have led me to a different career path or anything else. So really, I feel like I just kind of got a jump start on things, you
I
know?
do too. And your experience in business is what other people might read case studies about at business school, but you learned by
Yeah.
doing.
And
So,
that's the one thing I tell people about culinary school all the time. They're like, should I go to culinary school? I'm like, no, you should go get a job at a restaurant.
mm-hmm.
They're like, but I don't know how to do anything. I'm like, no, they teach you that stuff there. Like you're going to start washing dishes, which is good for you because you're going to come out, you go to culinary school without working in restaurants and they tell you, cool, you still don't have any experience. Go wash dishes. And you're going to be like, damn, I just spent 50 grand to go wash dishes.
Right.
And so now you're in debt and you're making the least amount of money you can make in a restaurant. You know, it's a vicious culinary school is kind of a trick on people. I'm not saying that there's not a real world application for it, but you better have a pretty clear path on how and what you want to do with that information when you get it. Because most of those people come out and they start right where I started, only I did it at 14 and they're doing it at 20. You know what I mean? So it's really and they got a big old bill to show for it.
Exactly.
So
That's the thing. And I think that let's acknowledge you did go to university. You did take advantage of university courses, particularly in psychology. So I am a big believer in the fact that when you go with the purity of intention, where you were following your intuition to a class or a course that you feel called to investigate further, there's something there important for you to learn. So it's like, I don't want to knock all university, but I think when people go just kind of because they think they have to and they're not going with some intention to it, they might miss that class
yeah,
with the essential info that they were looking for. I mean, psychology, that's so important just for personal development as well as business.
yeah, yeah. It was the rest of the core classes that probably kept me from finishing college. In fact, it was the rest of my math credits. I think I was 4 credits away from getting a degree and just never bothered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you still got the credits, right?
yeah. I mean, no, they're probably expired by now. It's been a long time, but
They
you know,
last.
I
They
took
last.
I took the classes. I know it's not like I'm going to go back at this point. You know what I mean? I don't
Hmm.
need the paper at this point. And honestly, if I was going to go, I would go for the sake of learning something. Like there's a very real part of me now, or at least 5 years ago, where I was like, man, it'd be really cool to go to culinary school now.
Yes, that's
you
true too.
know, because I didn't learn a lot of the technical cooking stuff. And honestly, I'll be in the kitchen sometimes with very classically trained chefs or people that have worked under really, high end chefs where they know a lot of stuff that I don't know. I've got a bunch of them that work for me that know a lot. I am in my company where our business is food and I started it. I am probably the 12th most talented chef. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like I can do anything any of these people can do, but I can't do it as well as a lot of them. And that was a realization too in the business thing was hire people better than you at
Definitely.
everything. Doesn't even matter what it is. If they're better than you at it, hire them.
Hmm.
And then tell them to do that and then you go do something else you were better at. And really I think the thing that I'm the best at is really doing what we're doing right now. It's the
Hmm.
talking, it's the connections, it's the explaining things to people, talking about what we do with passion, presenting new ideas, brainstorming. But as far as dragging things to the finish line or being very detail oriented and the fine finishes, not my strong suit in the slightest, and it took 10 years of owning a company to kind of have that understanding.
Hmm. Wow. And so you're owning a company. Now, I recently started my company uh, just late last year, late to the end of the year. And I'm still developing my services. But I'm working in a restaurant now as my day job. And so this
Right.
gives me freedom to then pursue my entrepreneurialism. So I persevere. I think nothing is more important than persistence. But I am still developing my model, my actual
Right.
business. So, in your case, as an entrepreneur, a successful one, how important was having a business plan on paper? When did that become important?
Honestly, it was way more important than anything else, and I didn't do it at all.
Right.
So in retrospect, had I had the foresight that most of my business was a result of snowballing an opportunity. Like it was
Yes,
like
I think that's
it,
the
it,
key.
yeah, well, I mean it can be, but you've got to have those things. You've got to have momentum, which you can't manufacture. I mean,
Mhm.
you can facilitate it, but you can't start it really. Or opportunity, which happens, organically, but it happens organically from certain actions that you did before that leads you to an opportunity. But you're never like shit. I worked for a race car team, traveling around the country doing the hospitality for a race car team. Never sought that out. Never knew that position existed. The fraternity thing. I never knew frat houses had chefs. That was
Yeah.
completely unknown to me, So it's like it's you gotta kind of have a very open mind in anything you're doing, but at the same time, like it all comes from talking to people. So the race car thing, we mentioned Bradley's Bar and Grill. I was working out of that kitchen. There's a gentleman that comes in there named Bob Vandergriff Sr. Bob Vandergriff Sr. has been part of the NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association, for
Ooh,
since the 70s, and
cool.
his son at the time was a driver for one of the ones with the parachutes that come out the back.
No
And,
way.
and he was like, "Hey, we're looking for a chef to feed our team and our corporate sponsors. It's 26 weekends out of the year all over the country. You travel with the team, you set up a kitchen, you cook." And I was like, man, that sounds awesome. This before I had my child. I was like, I'll do it. And then I hired my first sous chef and kind of turned over a little bit of control on the catering side that was now again
Mhm.
still running out of Bradley's Bar and Grill at the time, which was not conducive, but it worked. And I just went on the road 26 weeks out of the year with this race car team, just sight unseen. And it's like, had you told me when I was, making omelets at La Madeleine that cooking was going to take me to this, like you can never see the lines. You're never going to see the path,
Mhm.
no matter
Right.
how you look at it, because it's around corners, it's around turns, it's a series of dominoes, it's a series of meeting. Like, hey, I met Rick yesterday. He introduced me to John. John introduced me to him, and now this guy wants me to build him a restaurant. And it's like
Exactly.
it's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild. So You just have to have the radar up at all time. And if you hear something in passing where you're like, oh, it'd be cool to do that, ask about it. Take 5 seconds and be like, what does it take to get into that space? Or would you guys be looking for any more help in that regard? Or, hey, could I come out and check that out for a weekend? That sounds fascinating. And then you just dig back a little bit of dirt here and there, just pull back a little bit of dirt. And then you see the treasure chest. And that's the biggest thing I would say is don't, anything you put on that paper, you're now confined to that.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? Like, this is my business plan. This is how it's going to work. Well, what if it doesn't work like that?
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to be drawing a new one anyway. So I think it's more important to have a solid concept, like with the Marietta proper. We're going to be a wine bar first, a food service second, and a cafe, coffee shop kind of third. They're all going to work together, but the wine bar is the focus, the drinking environment with great aesthetics and a nightlife scene on the square for people to go before they go to the plays or come from the plays or special events, or they want to just come down to our members only wine cave, like all this cool stuff. Like, that's going to be the focus. But at the same time, I want to have the best breakfast burrito and cup of coffee on the square. So it's kind of like just a lot of different things tied to it. You know what I mean? But I never confined it to one space. We started talking about needs and things that go on in the square. Started with wine bar. Now it's daytime cafe, nighttime wine bar. Then it's alcohol service window for festivals. Then it's, and it's all these different avenues, and it's fluid. Everything's fluid.
Yes. So
if you're rigid, it's hard.
And then, like you say, you adapt and it expands.
That's it. I mean, it's if you stay rigid, you may accomplish what you wrote down on that paper, but that's the only thing you're going to accomplish is what you wrote down on that paper.
Mm.
And if you're going to accomplish more than what's on that paper, then you're going to have to rewrite on that paper anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So maybe don't confine yourself. And this isn't you. This is just generalities. It's
of course, right. General advice.
And I also have a really bad time saying yes to things that happen, like any kind of opportunity, and then working it through and realizing, oh, that wasn't worth my time, or that was a waste of money. But, people are like, oh, you're always doing all this stuff, like, and it costs money to do that. I was like, yeah, but that all of these at one time were things that I tried like that. Some work, some don't. They're like scratch off tickets. You hope for the best as you go, but you don't know what's underneath it until you scratch it, so you gotta try it.
Right. This makes me think of the rocket ship. There was a rocket launch just last week, and I watched the replay, and it was the whole point was it was a test, and the rocket was launched, and then something happened, and one of the things fell off. And so then I saw someone with a NASA shirt on in the Marietta Square one day, like the next day. Right. I said, oh, did you watch the launch yesterday? And they said, oh, you mean the one that blew up? And then I thought, oh my gosh, like, how do you think you get places? You got to launch those rockets.
You got to be ready to fail a lot in anything you're expecting to do well in. Mm-hmm. And you hear people say that, but and a lot of people believe it, but they don't really prepare themselves for it. I mean, I've set buildings on fire over my career. I've had employees fist fighting. I've had employees steal from me. We've crashed several company vehicles. We've destroyed $10,000 ovens. We have ran out of food at weddings. We have shown up an hour late for events. I've had fraternities that have fired us in the middle of a semester because the chef was drinking, or somebody said, like, showing it, like, I had to fire chefs. I mean, there's just the multitude of things that are outside of your control are always there, and they will constantly remind you that you do not have any control or hold on situations. You can prepare for the best. You should most certainly hope for the worst, but above all, just be ready to have a pivot on everything. Because if you don't, it's gonna suck. Like my business model during COVID's a great example.
Right.
Yeah. So business models that survived during COVID were ones that weren't predicated on gathering or large crowds. and I had always felt relatively diversified because, I've got the fraternity scene, which is way different than the catering scene, which is way, well, yeah, but they were all built on gatherings of people. So
Mhm.
everything went down. All of it, the whole thing. I mean, we had nothing. We couldn't do weddings. Schools were out.
Mhm.
Everything on my side of business is shut down. So I've got, 65 employees. Like, what are we doing? I don't know.
Wow.
I've got a bunch of contracts that, the way that our contracts were set up with these fraternities were, we get paid in 4 installments at the time. And the first 3 installments of those contracts basically go to just cover our costs. So it's labor, food, labor, food, labor, food, and then the last little bit of labor, food, and then what's left over. But
Mhm.
it stopped halfway through. So we only had debts. We didn't get any money on the back end. So now we didn't even have that cash flow at the end of the semester where we usually have to keep ourselves afloat. So it was, well, what are we going to do? So we did delivery door to door box meals. We did for Easter and Passover. We put together big packages and dropped them at people's houses. I mean, just anything we could think to do. I mean, I had something I hadn't done since I was 15 years old, which was we printed out flyers and stuck them on freaking mailboxes and had a limited menu. Had a limited menu weekly where it's like, hey, we'll bring chicken sandwiches and pasta primavera to your house. You just tell us
Right.
what time you want us there. And I mean,
Mhm.
it wasn't making money, but it was keeping people working.
Yeah, but that is amazing how you pivoted and you survived through COVID, where many businesses they closed their doors.
Yeah, and we probably would have. I was able to do some pretty creative negotiating as far as on the fraternity side of things. So again, I've got all these contracts, right? And
Mhm.
and technically these guys all owe us for these contracts, although it was a weird situation because it's like, hey, you owe us, 20 grand, but we also owe you 2 months of food service that we can't do, but all of our capital is tied up in your payments. So I said, can you pay us 50% of what you owe us? That will allow me to pay the chefs for the rest of the semester so that they will return whenever all of this ends. And then whatever you guys can pay us in addition to that, we will credit on your next statement as soon as service resumes. So it's like, hey, just give us some money to hold, basically, is what it was, and help us
Mhm.
retain our staff, which ended up really saving us because honestly, the hardest part of the fraternity business is finding good, competent, clean, hardworking, honest, and um, you know, non-checkered background chefs to be in these houses. And if I had had to start from scratch on that front, we wouldn't have made it. Especially with what the hiring pool looked like post COVID, we would have never made it. Never.
I believe it. People are the most important. Good quality people.
So
Right.
right at the beginning of COVID, I was able to cut all of my fraternity chefs a check for $4,500. Which is like, here,
Wow.
you're not going to be able to work for a while, but you're going to be able to. Oh, actually, I don't even know if we cut it to them all in one lump sum. I think we just kept our payrolls going like that.
Right.
And then obviously the PPP was a help when that came around, but that didn't come immediately. That took
I
you know that
remember.
took it took a while. So it was it was an interesting time. The cool thing I say I liked about COVID, it's the wrong analogy, but the one thing that kept me from going into full spiral panic was, and it's kind of the same thing about all of this major turmoil the country faces, the economic uncertainties and the looming war and all that, is like, yeah, your business, dude, you shouldn't be doing all these things in business, or you shouldn't take these risks right now because what if this happens? And I'm like, yeah, but if it happens, it's gonna happen to everybody. So we'll all be screwed. So what difference does it make if I push the envelope now or not if we're all gonna be screwed anyway? I might as well take
Good
the
point.
risks now. If things don't go to shit, I'm in a better position. If they do, we're all in the same position. Who cares?
Good point. That's right. And I think Douglas Adams, he wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Yeah,
Galaxy.
yeah.
And so he has the tome on the front of the book. It says, "Don't panic." So I like to remember that at all times. Don't
I
panic.
I struggle to think of a time in my life where panic helped anything. I really don't think
Mhm.
there is any. It Panic might have created a more hurried reaction that was beneficial, but not necessarily the thinking process or the brain patterns at that time were helpful. In fact, if anything, it makes it much more clouded. Um,
Right.
and a lot of times more knee jerk, which you just act, and then you're like, oh god, there was 18 different ways to do this better.
Right. And so where do you go to for advice? I mean, you have good mentors. Do you ever search business advice online or?
Very rarely do I use unvetted sources as advice that I take to heart.
Mhm.
There's a series of like-minded ADD entrepreneur, just get out there and do everything all at once kind of guys and gals that I have interacted with over the course of my career. My brother-in-law being one of them that I had told you about. Um,
Yeah.
a couple of clients over the years. There's a gentleman named Steve Gosnell. They were actually one of Dogwood's very first clients, and he and I have become friends and kept in touch a lot over the years. And he's been uber successful in the real estate and cell phone technology space for the cell towers. And he's just got such a bevy of business knowledge that I'm like, hey, what's the best way to go about this? I know our businesses aren't apples to apples, but like, how do you deal with partnership agreements? How do you deal with operating agreements? Things like that. Or, with Casey, even my partner in the proper, we would be much further behind in this process if we did not have his real estate knowledge, his connections with banks, his connections with builders, understanding of blueprints, understanding the city permitting. I mean, all of the things that have gone into this project in particular. There are so many things that are outside of my skill set and outside of my resource group that, not to say they wouldn't have gotten done, but they would have gotten done at a much, much slower pace. I mean, exponentially slower pace. So it's really cool. Like, I'm hoping on the back end of this, once his role is done, which is the upfront, get it off the ground, and he gets to step back. Hopefully, Jordan and I can take over and really run with it and show him where our skill sets come into play. But
Mm.
yeah, without Casey has been crucial in this role, getting this thing going, and he's such a busy guy. It's like, you almost feel bad sometimes because you're like, man, you've got so much going on, and you're taking on another probably 3 hours of work every day to get this off the ground. So we're very appreciative of having him as a partner because he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us right now.
That's beautiful. Yes, and he has a legacy in the Marietta Square as well.
Oh yeah, he's
And in
he's
that
Mr.
space.
Marietta.
Pardon?
He's Mr. Marietta for sure. We can't go out anywhere in the square without him saying hi to 38 people.
Right. I believe it. Yes. And that's the thing that I do love about Marietta Square. Not only the happy memories of growing up there, walking about for 4th of July, fireworks, and playing on the train as a kid or an older kid. Honestly, I still play on the train sometimes as an adult. But it's the fact that the square is always getting better.
Yeah,
So there were the establishments like Schilling's and Hemingway's, where family reunions, we would go and sit out on the cobblestone street and have so many happy memories there. Well, nowadays we have Max, which
yeah,
has delicious sea bass and fabulous style, great for
yeah.
expensive meals. And then there's the Red Hair Brewery, which is my favorite spot to host Bitcoin meetups. We
Nice.
regularly would gather there, and it was so much fun to have those Cuban appetizers and locally brewed beers there at the Red Hair. So now, as you're entering with Marietta proper, you're continuously raising the bar, and everything on the square is getting better. So we are so fortunate because a lot of places in the world, they don't have that excellence. They have deteriorated or faded away with the town square, and ours is thriving and it keeps getting better. So I am extremely grateful to walk up there every day and behold how beautiful and quaint it is. And to see all the people. I love it. So I'm really excited about Marietta proper, and I definitely will be following you. And how can people follow Marietta proper online?
We put it as the Proper Collective because this is kind of the first project of many we see in the same kind of vein. Where
Mm,
we'll have the whatever city we're in, the LJ proper or the Mumbai proper, wherever we end up. It's the propercollective.com, and the Instagram, I believe, is the Marietta proper. But
okay.
we've done very little in that space right now because, like you said, we're just in the opening phases. But I know Jordan was really adamant about getting the website off the ground.
I remember looking at it months ago, and it was Marietta proper on Instagram. I followed you, Marietta.proper on Facebook. But thank you so much for your time.
Of
And
course.
was there anything that you wanted to leave the audience with, or something else to remind us of?
If you hadn't put me on the spot, I might have been able to come up with something. uh, I don't know. I think for anybody, I've had a bunch of friends over the years that have come up to me and said, how do I do business, or what can I do to get business, or I'm scared to leave my job to start this business. Like, just remember, like, the worst case scenario is that it doesn't work and you just go back to doing what you were doing. Like, you can always just stay where you are, but if you don't try to do anything past that, then you don't have a choice but to be where you are. And if you're cool with where you are, cool. But if you want more, or you have goals, or you have a thing, don't let your fear of uncertainty or failure get in the way of that. Just try it. If it doesn't work, then just go back to working at the place you're working at. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. And then moving out of those comfort zones, it makes everything better
Yeah,
for
but I get the trepidation. I get why it's scary, but, like, just remember, the worst thing that could happen is failure. Nobody's gonna die. You're not gonna lose a limb. You're not gonna be blind. You'll have your health, and you'll have the same skill set that you have now with a little bit more experience on how to go about doing something the next time. And really, I mean, that's all you need. Just keep taking little baby steps.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yes. Well, Will, I think I hope you can be my guest again. You have such
Yeah.
insight to share. So I hope that maybe when there's the opening, I might come and do a live stream
Yeah.
showing
I
you.
was gonna say, let's go live from the proper. That'd be awesome.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. I'm ringing the bell.
I dig it.
Woo! Yes. So, Will Adamek, serial entrepreneur, successful business leader of Dogwood Catering, and leading the proper collective there as a team of fellows, fellows of excellence. Thank you, Will. Thank you for
Of
your
course.
time.
Thank you. Hey, be
And
sure to send me a screenshot of that yearbook picture. I got to show my wife that. She's going to think that's a trip.
I will. Okay, I'll send it to you right away.
Awesome.
So look
Well, it was great
forward to
talking to you. Thank you again for having me.
my pleasure. Thank you, Will.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good. Bye.
See ya.
Remember to subscribe and like to the channel. Yay! Subscribe and like. Be in the moment. Yay!